Hey guys, welcome to
Hello.
OCD Real Talk. Sam and I want to talk about compulsions because we talk about it every single day. And even we've talked about it 1,000 times, but no one listens. So we're
You're all still doing them.
we're
It's
all
falling
still
on
doing it.
deaf ears.
I mean, come on, why are you doing them? I mean, it's so easy. Just don't do them. That's that's the key message from this. But no, I think obviously there's so many things to talk about, and one thing that we want to really touch on as well in discussing giving up compulsions is also that through that process, like hope can be also lost
Yeah.
since, there are a variety of different symptoms, intrusive thoughts and feelings, doubts, whatnot that creep
Mhm.
in. So also talking about how you can stay on track with doing things, even if OCD is making you doubt every single thing that way. But yeah.
Mhm.
So Sam, any starting point you want to take?
I think you've got to look at the long-term damage that compulsions do because it's easy to forget about that, isn't it? It's easy to think, oh, if I just because obviously when you perform compulsions, you're feeling so bad, you're feeling triggered, you're feeling a heightened anxiety state. So it's easy just to look at it through a short-term lens and think, well, if I perform such a compulsion, whether that's reassurance, avoidance, mental replaying, whatever it may be, it's so easy just to focus on the short term reward, which would be the relief. But then by doing that, you tend to forget the long term damage as in you stay stuck because those compulsions reinforce the cycle. So, what I tend to advise people, and I had this personally myself, is that when I started to get better, only then did I start looking back and seeing how the compulsions were stealing time away from me. But it's important to remember that because when you're locked on chasing that relief, you're not thinking about the long term damage, you're just thinking about the short term. So, did you have that as well, Momin, where you were so fixated on getting the relief now, right this second, and then you completely forgot about how that was actually keeping you stuck in the long run?
No, of course. And I think and it's interesting because even when I started to realize how much time, energy, opportunities it was stealing away from me, I was still doing them. So,
Yeah,
the even though I could see the damage it was doing,
yeah,
but even from the point of realization, it can still take you quite a long time to actually make that change as well
definitely. Yeah,
still, because
yeah.
um I and it would because it's almost like muscle memory. It's like autopilot. I remember one distinct moment, very, very distinct moment where I was standing over the sink, washing my hands for like, I don't know, like the 50th time or something like that. And in that moment, I was like, why can't I stop? And it was like I literally felt like my body was on autopilot. Like it was not in my
Yeah.
control at all. It was just functioning out of habit, out of routine. It was so like instinctive. I could have, now looking back, obviously I could have stopped, but in that moment I felt completely powerless. And that was like a really bad feeling. It was not a good feeling at all because it just you feel so
Yeah,
stuck in it, and you're like, if I cannot stop this, despite having some desperation of like I want this to end, despite knowing that this is destroying my life, I'm still not able to stop. What else do I need
yeah,
for it to stop?
yeah, and that leads into feelings of hopelessness, doesn't it?
Yeah.
When you feel like if I can't even stop it, even though I know I'm aware of the long-term damage it's doing, and I'm still unable to stop it. This is where we just got to try and remain hopeful and just to keep chipping away one bit at a time and just try to cut them in the future. And the problem that I had, and I see all the time as a coach, is that when you are triggered, you remember that you will feel so overwhelmed, and all your attention will be focused on how do I get rid of this feeling? Because as we all know, being triggered is not a comfortable feeling at all. So it's totally natural to be looking to get rid, get rid, get rid. But over time, you've got to be able to see that that is the trap. And you often hear me say
Yeah.
that it's all about cutting compulsions when it matters. That you over the sink then. It's like doing it when it counts because quite often I hear this all the time on calls where people will say, "Yeah, I will cut compulsions. I'm determined to get better." I say it's great, but your action does the talking. Like you've got
Yeah,
to put your money where your mouth is because
yeah,
we can all just say, "Yeah, I'll cut compulsions," but it's doing it when it counts. But when you do slip up, that then leads into another thing that, oh, I'm never going to do them. So you sort of go to the extreme of, I'll never get better. So it's understanding how hard the task is, but always remembering that the reason you are stuck today is because of this
yeah,
powerless moment or this powerless moment where you feel like you can't stop them.
yeah.
That's why you're stuck today.
No, and
And
and that's a really good point as well about like, hey, I'll do the compulsion now, but next time I'm going to try harder.
exactly,
You fool yourself into thinking that you're actually going to make the effort next time, but you don't.
you won't.
If
You
you're
won't.
giving yourself an excuse this time, chances are you will also give yourself that excuse next time as well. So I mean, and of course, like obviously, the you, it's a learning curve and you improve over time and whatnot. But like we always say this that the time to change things is now, and I think it's
Yeah.
important to remember that because even if you have not planned that today is the day that I'll start cutting that compulsion, even if you make like an in the moment, spur of the moment decision of like, okay, I'm not going to do that compulsion, okay, then so be it. You don't need to have a like mentally prepared plan of like, okay, next week,
Mhm.
Monday onwards, I'm not going to do it. Right? It
Yeah.
can be like because I did this as well, and this is one of the reasons why I kept doing my compulsive behaviors was because I always thought that I'll only give it up when I'm feeling ready and
Yeah.
mentally prepared enough, right?
And you'd still be waiting today, wouldn't you? Because you never would have felt prepared enough and
I
already
never would have
or
done it.
comfortable enough.
Yeah.
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 And what I often say, and I said this to myself, is that when we talk about the long term, you've got to be, time isn't a given, right? So if we don't start cutting compulsions today, you're acting as if you're going to live forever. Because when you take the
Yeah.
approach of, I'll do that tomorrow, you know you won't. Everybody knows they won't because you would do it if you could, but it's just because you are you're almost like you're allergic to the discomfort. So, oh, I can't do that today. That's too much. I'll wait until I'm ready tomorrow. But that approach is if you're going to just have endless time to cut them. It's not a given. And what I say is that you're taking your compulsions to the grave with that kind of approach,
Yeah.
right? On your gravestone, it'll be X and X, died on X and X, lived his whole life doing compulsions, or lived her
Yeah.
whole life doing compulsions. And people tend to laugh and joke when I say that, but it's true because you could be dead this time, 5 years' time. And if you keep waiting until you're ready, that ready day is never here.
Yeah.
And tomorrow never arrives. And
Yeah.
Amon, what I just want to say is to why people find that so hard to embody is because you often hear us say it's like an addict, right? I liken when you're chasing relief, it's like an addict chasing a drug. But the problem is with that, and why we often hear it to be much harder, is because if you're taking a drug, you actually have the thing in front of you. Like you have the drug there, and you can see, like you can physically see it and the damage it does, and it's there. You are physically taking a drug, whether that's alcohol or whatever. The thing with compulsions is that they become so automatic and you do it almost on autopilot and you can't even
Yeah.
you don't even realize you're doing them half the time, is that is why it's so hard to cut because it's almost become second nature. It's been conditioned. You're conditioned to do compulsions. Whereas a drug, I'm not saying that's easy to cut in any way, but it's the physical. I'm going to just not go near that because it's a physical thing. I need to just stop taking that physical thing. Where with compulsions, it can be 24/7 all the time, where you're just
Yeah.
chasing that relief to a point where it's not like it's tangible. You can't just reach out for reassurance. There's so many nuances to it. There's self-reassurance, the mental analysis, and that is why it's so much more complex than just cut compulsions. You've got
Yeah.
to look at all the different ones that you're doing.
No, I mean, and that's, I mean, 100%. And I think that until I did not look at my beliefs or behind doing those compulsive behaviors, I wasn't like, I mean, it felt extremely aimless if I when I would read on the internet that hey, you have to stop doing compulsions. Okay, I get that, but like I mean, but it felt extremely aimless, right? And of course, when I looked at my beliefs behind it as to why, because if I take just one example, that if let's say my hands felt contaminated, right? And I felt the urge to do it. When I started looking at what was it that was bringing that urgency, it was that if I do not wash my hands right now, I might start feeling depressed to the level where that depression might stick permanently or long term and it might
Hmm.
not go away. So
Yeah.
when I thought about that, I was like, oh, so it's also coming from that belief that I must not be depressed in life,
Hmm. Yeah.
or
Yeah.
depression must not affect good things in life, where whatever it was, whether it was career, whether it was
Mm.
friendships or relationships, whatever it was. So when I started to break that down, I was like, oh, okay, so this is what it's made. I mean, the different components of what a compulsion is made of, that is what it was made of.
Yeah.
And it was not easy to obviously see initially, but I think that's where, and of course, it's not like, oh, I had that realization next day onwards, I'm starting to cut all my compulsive behaviors. I still had to, as you say, I mean, I had to, put my money where my mouth was, because I was not making that change. I was still not making that
Yeah.
change because I was like, okay, logically, I know, logically, I understand it, theoretically, I understand it. But there's that element of almost that wishful thinking where it's
Hmm.
like, okay, but maybe there can be a day where I am mentally ready and prepared enough where when I do cut this compulsion, I also do not feel as triggered and anxious
Yeah.
because I've
Wait for
been
the right
told,
time.
right? So you're also waiting for a day where not only will you be ready enough for it, but you also think that because your head is going to be like your mindset is going to be placed in just the right way,
Mm.
where whatever discomfort or anxiety comes, you will be able to handle it with immense amount of grace and calm.
Mm.
Right?
Mm.
So it's almost
Yeah.
that perfectionistic level of control and waiting for the right moment. But if you're going to keep that mindset, doing compulsions, like cutting compulsions is going to be like really difficult for you to do because you'll not feel convinced enough that
Yeah.
that you will be able to handle the anxiety. You have to go in with that dose of uncertainty that you might not be able to handle it with grace and calm, and it might throw you off balance.
Such a good point. Such a key point. And it's never as simple as just cut compulsions. It's not that simple because otherwise you would just do it. So you have to address the beliefs that are hiding behind why the compulsions are being performed. And it took me a little while to fully grasp that. It took me a little while to understand as to why I was actually performing them. To take my confession, for example, right? Of course, I knew there were no benefits for me confessing and seeking
Yeah,
reassurance. I knew that because I was still in the same position. I could see that, and from an intellectual standpoint, I can see that I wasn't getting anywhere by seeking reassurance. However, when you're locked on, as we all know, you're desperate for that relief. The only way it came down was showing grit and determination by yes, resisting them, and also seeing the real advantages of not doing compulsions and the real disadvantages of doing compulsions. So yes, but addressing the beliefs behind why I was doing it. So my demands. I need to get certainty, or I must get this off my chest. I have to let them know, or I have to get this reassurance in order for me to be at peace. Right? I
yeah,
can't stand this feeling anymore. This feeling is too unbearable. It's too much. It's too difficult. I can't cope. Therefore, I need relief now. That I need relief now is a huge driver behind most
yeah,
compulsions. And where I used to go wrong, and this is where the fear of fear comes into it, when I say I used to go wrong, where everybody goes wrong, is what OCD will do, it will convince you that if you don't do this compulsion now, your life is forever ruined. Like there's no coming back from this one. Like you touched on yourself, where you'd be permanently depressed,
yeah,
and I had that a lot. Where if I didn't get certainty on this, so let's use an example: driving OCD, right? So it would feel I'd feel so compelled to check behind to see if I hit anybody, and it would say, well, Sam, if you don't check now, then your life is now going to be miserable forever because you'll never get over this. And if you don't get certainty on whether you've just hit somebody whilst driving, then you cannot enjoy anything. Your existence is now null and void. Is over. So obviously, with that line of thinking, that's super rigid. That's
Yeah.
as you think like that, you're then going to turn around and check because you're then desperate to not have a life of miserable existence. Obviously,
Yeah.
so you've got to look at behind why you're performing, and it's never as simple. And I get frustrated when I see the advice that just cut compulsions. Yeah, okay, you can tell a smoker just to stop smoking, but there's
Yeah.
a reason behind why they keep smoking. You know, the procrastination, the
Yeah.
gratification, the stress relief, the advantages of smoking and disadvantages. Anyway, that's a different debate. But what I'm saying is, it's never ever as simple as just do that because you wouldn't be watching this video right now.
Yeah.
You would have cut your compulsions and you'd be living your merry life.
Yeah.
Okay, you've got to address more than that. It's deeper than that, and it
Yeah.
takes longer than that. And there are so many nuanced, subtle compulsions as well, to a point where you don't even know they're compulsions. Think of all the confusion ones, Momin. All the
Yeah.
ones where you feel confused and you're just desperately to try and solve. All the solving going on. I thought that was natural for years. And I realized all
Yeah.
that solving, me responding to a thought, that neutralization, that was all very compulsive. But it just
Yeah.
seemed like second nature to me because I've been doing them since childhood.
And on that point of like the subtle compulsions as well, like I was just saying this to someone on one-to-one call earlier, is that, and I want to also do like a separate video on this as well, that compulsions do not always come in the form of urgency. They don't
Mm.
always come in the form of like, oh, I have to, because so this is what happens. People are like, oh, but I wasn't feeling that anxious. I wasn't feeling desperate. And, it was just a question that I had, or it was just, a little thing that I felt like I had to do. And it's important to still highlight that, I mean, compulsions do not always come with a panicky, urgent sensation. It can also be you feeling very calm and collected, but just that subtle nature of you wanting to answer that little doubt that you have, or do something about it.
The
And
questions
that,
at the
yeah,
end of a
yeah,
one-to-one call, those sneaky questions that you get, a very common case of that.
yeah, yeah, because it's like, okay, I'll see you next week. Hey, just one more question, like, and then
Yeah.
you just want something to cap that
Yeah.
off. But I mean, even with the perspective on what we were talking about earlier, which is how much time is lost to compulsions. I mean, I'm 31, right? So when I look back on my 20s, uh, from age like 20 to 27. I mean, I was suffering with OCD even before that, but like the extremely bad patch that started happening was from like age 20. So from 20 to 27, I was consumed by compulsions. I was avoiding, I was procrastinating, demotivated, and I was not ready to change any of my behaviors at all. Granted that, of course, for up till I think when I was 25, I had no idea. I mean, I knew I had OCD, but I didn't know what to do about it, right? So, granted, I was lacking the knowledge as well and everything. But in a general sense, if I look at it, I essentially my 20s were in some ways, not completely, because not everything is that black and white, but in some ways my 20s were completely wasted, because of me just giving all my free time to OCD and compulsions. And now at like when I turned 30 was when I actually started to feel like I was kicking my life into gear. Even though I recovered at 28, but it's not like, oh, I've recovered, and now next day onwards, like life is at like 10 on 10, and you are pursuing everything that you had given up on, and blah, blah, blah. No, because I mean, like all the things that I had given up on, life goals, personal interests, hobbies, things I enjoy doing, I had given them up for so long that it took me a while to reincorporate them into my life again, little by little. And to be able to do that, obviously it's a slow burn. It's a simmering process in that way of it took me a couple of years to incorporate things back into my life to a point of being like, okay, now I feel like I can level up and start to take my life to the next level. So if I had, I mean, in an ideal world, if I had, let's say, given up my compulsive behaviors or whatnot at, I don't know, age 23 or something, and I had recovered by age 23 or 24, I could have maybe hypothetically, let's say, been doing things that I'm doing now at age 26 or 7, right? And I'm not saying this in a perfectionistic way of like, oh, we need to like, hurry things up. And I'm not saying that, but what the point I'm trying to illustrate is that how much time we give off to OCD
Mm.
is it takes so much time to also to just get back your life. I have compassion for myself. I feel sad that of course, like I mean, maybe there was time lost to it, but I don't feel depressed about it. I don't beat myself up. I don't feel like, oh my God, was completely meaningless. In fact, I mean, for me to be able to, help other people through OCD is the meaning that came from those lost years.
Yeah,
Right. So I mean it's about what meaning you get from something and how you interpret it. So for me
yeah,
there's no like, there's no sense of like doom and gloom of like, oh my God, things were lost.
yeah,
But from a point of motivation, I think it can be good for people to realize that um your time and energy could be utilized for so many other things as well. And of course, it's not easy, but like that can be something that propels you forward. And that's where some of the hope can also come in, that
yeah,
maybe in the absence of you doing compulsion, something new can come from it. And that transition period will feel torturous for sure. It's not going to feel that great,
yeah.
but something new can come from it.
Yeah, for sure. And it's all a trade-off, isn't it? You know, every time you perform a compulsion is a trade-off, right?
Yeah.
You're then you're okay, short-term, not even comfort, it's just short-term relief to some degree. But then the long term is just you're gonna just
Yeah.
not gonna get it, you're gonna get worse, aren't you? You're gonna just take it to the grave. So you've got to remember that each time you do perform a compulsion, is it worth it? Are you getting offered a good deal by OCD? And every time the answer is no, and because OCD never delivers on its end of the bargain anyway. And the reason why people find it so difficult to cut compulsions, and I'll give you an example of why I found it so difficult, was because it used to really ramp up during big occasions. So let's say I was going on vacation.
Yeah.
That was the time I'd feel under pressure. That's how I would it. I felt under pressure. I felt like,
Yeah.
right, I can't be suffering. I can't be feeling anxious. I mustn't be feeling triggered right now. Well, I'm sorry, but that's waving a red rag to a bull. But people say to me, yeah, but Sam, I don't want my holiday ruined. I don't want my Christmas day ruined. I don't want my special occasion ruined. I go, yeah, I know you don't want it ruined, but you've got to understand that you've got OCD, meaning that you might have to be willing to experience discomfort on these big days, on these big vacations, on your wedding day, your Christmas day, whatever it is, in order to get the long term freedom, the long term recovery. Because yet again, it's too short sighted. It's a short sighted approach. It's just you're willing to trade off your long term recovery just to have a good holiday. When you view it
Yeah.
like that, it sounds wild. Of course, you want to have a good holiday. Of course, you do. But look at the trade off. Doesn't mean you have to have a bad holiday. It just means you might have
Yeah.
to go on holiday feeling anxious, more triggered than usual. You've got to
And
be
like
willing
you
to
can,
allow.
let's say you live up to 80, right? So out of the
Yeah,
80
exactly.
Christmases that you've had in your life, let's say out of 80, 10 were Christmases that weren't that great.
Yeah,
Is that really that much of a bad trade-off? Not really. I mean, you
exactly.
had 70 ones that were actually quite nice.
Exactly.
And probably even five, six, seven of them you probably don't even remember that much because you're very young, right? So in any case, like if you have 70 good Christmases versus 10
Yeah.
bad ones, I mean, that's a fair trade. Same for holidays. Like, I mean, if you're 80 years old, you probably will take like what, maybe one holiday a year, maybe two holidays a year if you want to really go out. If like, 20 of those holidays don't go super well, okay, they don't.
Mhm.
So, but so having some long-term perspective can help with also see that this one moment of you trying to perfect your celebration or good moment or whatever it is, like
Yeah.
you have to be able to risk that. And I think when people are also, it's funny because on calls when I'm saying to people that you have to give this compulsion up and stuff like that, people are trying to convince me that no, they still need to do it, right? They're trying to
Yeah.
come up with like a case as
The
to why they're not,
justification. Yeah, yeah.
right? And so I always say that Well, think of it this way. You've tried out a certain way of dealing with your anxiety or your discomfort for a certain period of time. You've tried out like one format of it. It's not working. Clearly, it's not working. You're not happy. So why not? I'm not giving you the guarantee that giving up compulsions is going to completely change your life for the positive. Sure, you may not be convinced of it. I might be wrong. I'm willing to even, concede. Sure, maybe I might not be correct about it, but how can you say that that does not work out for you if you haven't given it a proper shot?
Exactly.
And you giving up compulsions just for one day or one week is not like a proper shot. A proper shot is you going without that compulsion for maybe a few months, at least to see how life turns out. And if by the end of it, life is still horrible, sure, you can come after me and say that, you're wrong and,
Yeah.
and life is terrible. But
Yeah.
then, you know,
Let's just give it, yeah, please just give it a try because you've
yeah,
got to think of your current situation and ask yourself, well, what have I got to lose? That was a big one for me. I thought, what have I
yeah,
got to lose? Because I remember at times being totally fed up of just feeling better temporarily and then crashing and having a setback and relapse. And I thought, I don't want to go through my life just trigger to trigger
yeah,
and just relying on the temporary relief from the reassurance just to get me through because that isn't sustainable.
yeah,
That isn't going to last for very long at all. And what you've got to remember here is that well, you're going to grimace as I say this, all of you are, but we can't sugarcoat this. Cutting compulsions is probably going to be the hardest thing you do in your life, right? I don't think that's even an exaggeration because we we can't sugarcoat that. It's going to be that hard. But look what you're going to get from it, or not going to. No guarantee, as Momin's saying. But look what you could possibly get. You could possibly get long-term freedom, long-term recovery, robust recovery, and not just with OCD in life. Because if you've built the tolerance, mainly the discomfort tolerance, if that's very high, you're going to deal with life's injustices and life's hassles and hardships much more efficiently than somebody that doesn't have their tolerance very high, in my opinion, right? So you're getting a good deal there. You're getting recovery from OCD, plus you're going to have such a robust mindset towards life's problems. I think that's worth the trade of the short term anxiety spike, the short term suffering. And it is suffering. We know that. Me and Mama know that all too well. We can't lie to you. It is. But you've got to think the better deal for you is if you want the long term peace, you're going to have to be willing to sacrifice your feelings now. But look at now. Look at it now. It's not exactly as if you're living in paradise now, is it?
yeah,
It's not exactly you've got much to lose. Yes, you might have external, like you might have a great family, a great job, great career. Okay, fair enough. But it's just a feeling, it's just a sensation. You're not going to lose everything as in externally. You're just going to feel not great. You're going to feel uncomfortable for the foreseeable.
yeah.
And we've got to be willing for that and take that chance. Please take that risk because you won't ever see the long term reward if we don't sacrifice the short term.
Yeah, and I think even with that question of like, when people ask how do you remain hopeful, through the process,
Yeah.
when symptoms are up or, you have OCD morphing onto something else or you feel like you don't have the power or things will never change. Like there are a few things like I think all the things that we have discussed today, these are like obviously important perspectives to keep in mind as well. On some days as well, you've also just got to let yourself feel hopeless as well, right?
Yes,
And that and
definitely.
and that doesn't mean that, oh, okay, I'm going to let myself feel hopeless. I'm just going to lie in bed and just, be under the covers and not do anything and not even eat my meals or whatever. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying go towards
Not
complete.
neglective.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But I mean, stay on top of your life and routine or
Yeah.
structure and everything, but also let yourself feel hopeless because you've got to also get comfortable with that too. Because
Yeah.
I think people like people also think that, oh, because we recovered from OCD, we are 100% seeing hope all the damn time in life, right? And I mean, I've had hurdles in my life where at times I've had weeks where I thought, okay, with this hurdle, I don't think there is a solution, right? Or at least I don't see one right now.
Yeah.
And I've let myself not have that solution. I've let myself be like, okay, maybe I'm not even sure if this will change or not.
Hmm.
And that's that. But I've not added. a secondary layer of I must not feel hopeless about this, or there must always be hope that I must
Yeah,
always see. Sometimes you've got to also let yourself, maybe not see it because that hope like anything can become compulsive. So if you're also like in every single hopeless moment, I need some antidote of hope every single
yeah,
time. Like so also like allow yourself to feel that too,
yeah.
at times as well.
I had many times like that, feeling utterly hopeless. I remember writing in the group that I was in about 6 years ago when yeah, 6, 7 years ago when I first got added. And I remember many times just saying, I feel utterly hopeless,
Hmm.
but I'm just clinging on to the crumb of the chance of hope being there one day. And that were my
Yeah.
words. It was, so I feel utterly hopeless right now, but the thing that's keeping me going is that one day I might feel hope,
Yeah.
right? And I can't stress that enough because if you're watching this video and you are feeling in total despair and you just can't see any glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel, you have no other choice than to keep going and just hoping that one day you feel hopeful. But you have to still put in the work. You can't just
Yeah.
wait around for hope. You can't just go, well, Sam and Momin said that I'm going to feel hopeful one day. No, you've got to keep working. And ironically, the more you keep working and chipping through the hopelessness, that might open up feelings of hopefulness
Yeah.
because you start building momentum. You start seeing
Yeah.
changes. Maybe you get through the first book and you think, wait, that actually really resonates. That makes sense. Wow. And then you might still feel very triggered and panicked a lot, but you can see a path to getting better.
Yeah.
And even if it is just the tiniest glimmer of hope, we've got to just keep moving in that direction. And there
Yeah.
will be times where that glimmer of light is blocked out, it's
Yeah.
blackened, you can't see it anymore. And it's just how, because this is where many go wrong, is that once that glimmer of light's gone, they then go into self-neglective mode and life neglective mode and
Yeah.
future neglective mode, where they just go, they throw the towel in and go, I'm not going to bother. This isn't working. I say, yeah, but come on. You've got to remember this is going to take time. You can't expect miracles. There is no quick fix. There's no short just solution to this. If there was, trust me, we'd be telling you.
Yeah.
But it's just that's not reality, I'm afraid.
Yeah. And I
And I
think, I
can't
mean,
emphasize that enough.
it's also like, I mean, if something has with OCDs, and that's how it literally feels like, right? Where
Yeah,
it feels like, okay, there's a 99% chance that I will not get better, and only
mhm,
maybe a 1% chance that I will, right? Even
yeah,
in, let's say you need to cut your compulsions, right?
yeah.
And logically, you might feel like, okay, there's a 1% chance this might help, but 99% you're absolutely convinced that it won't help. And, and actually you do need to keep doing compulsions. Why don't you take that 1% chance then? I mean, there it's still it's not 0% at the very least. And I mean, let's be realistic, right? I mean, not from a point of reassurance, but even if there's 1% chance, give it a shot. Give that, build on that 1%.
Might as well
Because
take the gamble, haven't you? Because
yeah,
look at your current situation. Reflect, look in the mirror and think, well, where am I getting now? Doing what I'm currently doing, where is that getting me? And you're going to need those tough, cutthroat conversations with yourself where you think, what what I'm doing right now isn't getting me to my desired goal. And it's not just your desired goal, it's not getting you to your desired life, right?
yeah,
Because OCD will affect your life. It's not just, oh, I just got to sort this OCD problem out of my on the side. No, OCD will get into everything in your life. It's going to look to spread like wildfire. So you might as well think, I'm going to take that 1% chance. I'm going to roll the dice and see where I end up. It's a real shame when people maybe come in for a call and we outline the work that's going to be required and we explain very honestly, look, there's hope and you can make real progress in short time, but it's going to be a longer term approach because we're aiming for getting better here. And no, I just need the short term fix. The trouble with that is way too short sighted and you're just looking to feel better. Feeling better isn't necessarily getting better. To get better and
yeah,
to feel better to get better and to stay better, which obviously means feeling better in the long run, that is going to take a lot of short term sacrifice.
yeah,
You don't want to just say, I'm hopeless now. What's the point? I give up. Because great stories, remarkable stories are built through hopelessness,
yeah,
right? When you've come from nothing and you build up. And that's what you've got to be trying to look at even in the face of adversity.
And when people also ask us the question that, okay, how do I become more willing to take that chance? I mean, of course, like we can tell you that, okay, maybe you can do this and this and this to become more willing. But beyond a certain point, we can't just treat you to be willing. You have to be the
Yeah,
one to teach yourself to be
yeah,
motivated, right? I mean, we can like, and Sam, you and I both work with people who have maybe been coming in for maybe a year, maybe even a bit more, who are perhaps still doing those compulsive behaviors that they were doing at the very start, right?
yeah,
And so, and sometimes, I have said to people on one-to-one calls as well, I was like, I don't know what else to tell you
yeah,
because they're thinking I will tell them something completely different, out of the box, some other like profound oracle wisdom that God has given to me in the moment or something
yeah,
like that. But like I mean I'm like I've explained it from maybe at this point 20, 30 different angles. I don't know what
yeah.
else to say. Um
What I tend to do is, as a wake-up call, and I say this very, very thoroughly, I say, but you don't want it enough, do you? You don't want recovery enough.
yeah,
And I often get greeted with, well, no, but I've been reading all the books. I'm coming in for calls. I say, well, you're doing practically everything in regards to your beliefs. You're ticking the boxes, but you don't want it enough from a willingness angle, do you? You're not
yeah,
willing to experience the discomfort. We can say we want it, but your action does the talking, I'm afraid. You've got to practice what you preach. You've got to put your money where your mouth is and show us that you want it enough. Display that, as in face your fears, be willing to look out for exposures, proactively look for them, proactively try and cut compulsions. Don't just wait for us to give you the green light to do something. If
yeah,
I know one is willing to recover when they tell me and show me they are willing to do whatever it takes, as in they are they've had a huge trigger, they faced a huge exposure, maybe just an exposure just landed on their lap, and I can quite clearly see that they are willing to experience anything. They're willing to cry, panic, feel all immense discomfort just to get through how just the day, one day at a
yeah,
time. Because people will say, no, but if that happens, Sam, yeah, it's fine. I'll resist compulsions. But as soon as it happens, no, that's too much. I'll do it, and then do
yeah,
the compulsion. So the action does the talking, doesn't it? Because we can all talk the talk, but whether somebody walks the walk is a different matter altogether.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And yeah, that just comes down to your own personal willingness to take a chance. We
Yeah,
can't we can't we can't like inject it in you. We can motivate you and push you, but
yeah.
eventually it has to be taken by you yourself.
I really wish that maybe AI can do this, that I can give a snippet of life being recovered to people, to everyone that's stuck right now,
Yeah,
because there's not much more than me and Momin can say, or any of the coaches can say, to convince you how worth recovery is. We're not just pretending, oh, it's amazing. It's not only mental freedom, but it's a life overhaul, right? You're not dancing down the street happy as Larry all the time. You're not in this
yeah,
paradise fairy tale like world. No, there are real challenges. There's real hardships that you still face, but your philosophy's changed, hasn't it? And the energy's come back. You know, life feels much brighter, you feel much more plugged in, and you won't see that. Like me telling you, it doesn't convince you enough. You won't see that until you actually start doing the work yourself. You've got to take our word for it, yeah, but you're never going to get there unless you actually put in the work. So I do kind of wish I could just
yeah,
send you a snippet and go, "This is what your life could be like if you just are willing to cut those compulsions
yeah,
and do as advised, as in put in the work and
yeah.
so on." But it's hard
Maybe
because
some
words don't do enough
virtual
at times, do they?
Yeah, maybe some virtual augmented reality something can help us achieve that one day. Honestly, because it would be much needed. I mean, you can
And
almost physically then feel life that way.
yeah, the problem is you're also going to feel like you're the exception. This is the thing. You're going
Yeah,
to feel like yours is different to everybody else, and I've had this many times where people have said, "Well, maybe your OCD wasn't as bad as mine," and I go, "Okay, we're not going to sit and compare OCD because that's totally wasteful."
yeah,
But that line of thinking isn't going to work for you, is it? Just saying, yeah, but yours was different, so you can recover, I won't.
yeah,
That's just not going to work. So even if yours was worse than everybody else and yours was different, You could still roll the dice. You could still take the risk and try to recover. No guarantee to
I
ever
mean,
get it.
I tell people all the
Still
time, by
try.
the way, I didn't come across anyone who had the specific contamination fear I had, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, but for me, at the end, it was like, I mean, I finally got tired of it, and I thought, even if I haven't found anyone else with this, I will make this work for myself. I'll do whatever it
Yeah.
takes to kind of like adapt the principles to it for myself. So,
Yeah.
you've got to be willing to be like, okay, maybe you are the unique case where things are different, but
Yeah.
mm,
I
still
think
see where things
just
go.
I think another important point to touch on there is that recovery is not a race. Okay, so because people often see it as okay, if I just spend 3 months cutting compulsions, then I can recover and then I can live happily ever after. I say, I'm sorry, it doesn't work like that. You want to be cutting out unhelpful behaviors, as in compulsions, which are hindering your stable mental health,
Yeah,
right? So view it as a lifelong process of how do I continue to build a solid mental health. View it like that. There's no finishing line. There's no end. You just run end destination where you get there and you're recovered and you celebrate. Recovery is a byproduct of cutting all these unhelpful behaviors, changing your philosophies, your perspectives, your structures. It recovers a byproduct of that. But you still, OCD or not, you still want to be cutting out unhelpful behaviors. You still want to be looking if you're disturbed today and think, well, how do I become undisturbed?
yeah,
OCD just obviously heightens that, it amplifies that. That's the disorder that it is. Hence why it's nuanced and when the coaches come in and will guide you there. But if you're disturbed, you still want to change things, don't you? And
yeah,
if you're doing unhelpful behaviors, as in compulsions, OCD or not, they're still not going to benefit you. So try and build a solid mental health in the long run. See it as a
yeah,
lifelong project rather than I'm doing this just to recover and then I can live happy.
yeah.
It's not like that at all.
No, and that's a really important point, and that feeds into the fear and fear of having setbacks and whatnot.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm very realistic. I mean, yes, I've recovered from OCD, but does that mean I'll never have any mental health challenges in life? No, of course not. I mean, I probably I will. I mean, I will have maybe periods of just feeling a bit maybe depressed or something like that. I could still have that, right? But my ability to deal with those mental health challenges will be extremely improved compared to, maybe like 10 years ago or something like
yeah,
that, because I have solid foundations that I have built over time.
mm,
Um, and I think that is, I feel like, far more important than being like, oh, I don't ever want to have any mental health challenge or setback or anything like that ever
yeah,
again. That's
mm,
first of all not realistic, and that's too high pressure as well to try
yeah,
and achieve
exactly. Yeah.
anywhere.
You can't recover with a gun to your head. You're putting too
Yeah,
much pressure on. And I say, well, isn't there a greater reward than mastering your own emotional health? And like Ellis says, controlling your own emotional destiny.
yeah,
OCD doesn't even come into that. OCD is just a disorder that you have, unfortunately, via genetics that you have. But everybody has mental health. So you want to be viewing it as how do I, like with physical health, you would work on your
yeah,
physical health, you try and improve it. Because a doctor might say, if you don't improve your physical health, you will die. Why is mental health any different? You don't want to spend your life miserable and suffering. So if you are willing to try and master your own emotional health,
yeah,
that will come via changes. That's going to have to be hard work and practice and persistence with trying to constantly improve that. It's
yeah,
not just you recover and then you never have any problems again. Your mental health is critical, and OCD is just there, obviously making it harder for you, but it's even more of a
yeah,
motivator to work on it.
yeah. No, 100%. Um, I think
I
that
think
covers most of
I
it.
think that ends it quite well as well.
Yeah, I think that wraps it up quite well for sure. Yeah, we really want to, I think, talk about compulsions in depth more because I mean, I think until the end of time, well, maybe not, let's see, but we might have to talk about compulsions over and over again.
Yeah,
But no, and remaining hopeful because it's really important, and hopefully this video will also give you the wake up call and the boost that you need to change your behaviors that you are still sticking to. But yeah, no, Sam, thanks for being here as always. And yeah, we will
very
see you
welcome.
in
Hope
another
you all
one.
enjoyed.
Yeah, all
And
right.
cut those compulsions as if
Yeah.
your life depends on it, because it does.
If you've made it this far into the video, please cut your compulsions. All
Cheers,
right.
guys. Bye bye.
Have a good day. Bye.